Hi, I'm busiest. Welcome to the show. Armed immigration officers have been deployed at some of the busiest US airports. ICE agents have been patrolling terminals, security lines, and checkpoints. US President Donald Trump says they have been deployed to help during a partial government shutdown that has caused long lines at security control points at airports across the country. How did ICE agents end up at airports? And are they there just to support the staff shortage, or will they, as some fear, go after people they believe to be undocumented immigrants? Let's talk about this with Claire Finkenstein. She's the faculty director of the Center for Ethics and the Rule of Law at the University of Pennsylvania. Claire, it's really good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us, are you concerned that ICE agents are now at the airports?
I'm very concerned about that. I managed to fly in from Europe myself yesterday, and of course they were not yet deployed. But as a traveler, I'd be concerned right now about flying with ICE, manning the TSA checkpoints or whatever it is that they're supposed to be doing at airports. The tactics that we saw used in Minneapolis were incredibly concerning, with violations of the constitutional rights of Americans as well as undocumented immigrants. And they sowed chaos wherever they went. They have extremely poor training for this kind of operation. Their training times have notoriously been very much shortened. And it's not at all clear that they're really there to try to shorten lines, though that's the ostensible reason for the deployment, as much as to intimidate Democrats into giving way on a budget crisis that is holding up funding for Department of Homeland Security and for ICE specifically.
So, Claire, thanks for sharing your concerns with us. But before we speak further, let's first look at some of the background and see how we got here. This all started because of money. Lawmakers in Washington are at odds over funding for the Department for Homeland Security, which includes the Transportation Security Administration, or TSA. Those are the people responsible for security at airports. TSA officers haven't been paid since February 14th, when the Department of Homeland Security partially shut down. A couple of days ago, President Trump said if Democrats failed to approve funding, quote, "I will move our brilliant and patriotic ICE agents to the airports where they will do security like no one has ever seen before, including the immediate arrest of all illegal immigrants who have come into our country." He then went on to add, "I look forward to seeing ICE in action at our airports." Claire, I've got so much to ask you about this. Let me start with this question. Are these immigration officers trained to deal with the thousands of passengers they will encounter at the airports?
Not at all. So, as I was beginning to suggest, they are badly undertrained for this kind of job. And as we saw in Minneapolis, they were undertrained for that kind of job. They have a very limited training period. The surge of ICE agents, the ambitions of the Trump administration in terms of the number of agents that they want to get out there on the streets, or in this case to the airports, is so significant that they've had to shorten these training periods to just about nothing. And in particular, dealing with passengers boarding airplanes or arriving on airplanes is a whole different kind of deployment from the kind of immigration operation that they've been running in major U.S. cities. Not that they've done so well on that. And they're really not trained to interact well with civilians. We've seen them use extremely brutal tactics. They don't have a firm grasp on the rule of law. And they're not, from the standpoint of the Trump administration, really intended to, because I think part of the purpose here is to intimidate people, intimidate, of course, on the immigration front, but I think as well to intimidate ordinary Americans into compliance on the oppositional front. We certainly saw that in Minneapolis, as well in this case is to intimidate political foes on the funding debate and power struggle that's going on in Congress.
So, Claire, you say that they have not been trained to directly interact and deal with the passengers. And on top of that, polls show the public has a negative view of ICE. So, how are people in the US reacting to their presence at the airports? What have you been hearing from people?
It's very hard to tell other than on social media right now, but unconfirmed reports suggest that there was an extremely problematic case that occurred in San Francisco today in which a woman who I believe is an American citizen was being arrested or at least dragged away, and they were demanding that she show her citizenship papers. And it looked like there were quite brutal tactics being used. A lot of people were gathered around, very similar to the scenes that we saw in Minneapolis, with a lot of opposition to ICE behavior. So if you imagine the sorts of scenes that we saw in Minneapolis or that we've seen in other major cities such as Los Angeles, and bringing those scenes into an already chaotic situation in the airports, you can imagine how much more difficult it's going to make things today.
And help us understand, we have all seen ICE grow in power and influence since the start of Trump's second term. Why has this agency become so important for Donald Trump?
Well, let's begin with the fact that there was a bill that the administration pushed very hard, nicknamed the Big Beautiful Bill, back in 2025 in the spring, that surged funding for ICE to roughly $22 billion. So that's a funding increase of a level that we haven't seen before for this agency, that went from a much lower funding point of about $10 billion up to, as I say, 22 to even up to $30 billion. The reason that the Trump administration is doing this, of course, has everything to do with its stance on immigration. That's the first layer of the complex chess game that this administration is playing with ICE. But I think it also really has to do with trying to silence political opposition, since a lot of the activity that ICE has engaged in has had to do with Americans expressing their First Amendment rights. So the level of brutality, the level of intimidation that we've seen has not just been on the immigration front. I think people need to understand that to really understand what the purpose of this surge of ICE agents has been over the past 6 months.
So with the high funding, we also see that, as you've said, that some of ICE's long-standing guardrails and oversights that, like you are saying, many others say that they have now been stripped away. Elaborate a bit more on this.
Well, we have to see this as a kind of militarized, almost a paramilitary force. It's like a police force, but they're not really trained the way police are. Police are generally trained to respect the constitutional rights of Americans, and they're bound by very strict rules, and they're under the control of state and local authorities. This is a kind of militarized organization which the president seems to feel he can call out at his pleasure. And let's understand that it comes in the wake of a decision that the Supreme Court made called Trump v. Illinois, involving the National Guard, in which Trump was told he couldn't use the National Guard in this way, as he was previously using it. So whereas we previously saw National Guard called out to Illinois, California, a number of other states that were serving a similar purpose and coming under the control of Customs and Border Patrol and engaging in immigration work to sort of support and boost the work of ICE. Once the Supreme Court said that, the Trump administration substituted ICE agents and the surge in ICE for the National Guard presidents. Now, I should add that President Trump, in his remarks today, actually said that if this didn't work, he was going to call forth the National Guard. And I don't know what authority he thinks he would use to do that in the wake of that Supreme Court decision that I just mentioned.
And Claire, if he does allows National Guard, then what could be the implications?
Well, I think this would end up very quickly in court again, since it would violate the Trump v. Illinois decision, where the Supreme Court made clear that under the authority that President Trump was using, it was not legal. So we'd have to find a way to do this, such as the Insurrection Act. And there's really no legal justification for using the Insurrection Act to claim that there's some sort of insurrection going on at airports to use the National Guard there. So we'd have to come up with some excuse. But it really suggests that the Trump administration is looking to have a military type force in its back pocket that it can use to call out at a moment's notice, and there may be various purposes for it: political retribution, negotiations with Congress, trying to get his way in any number of situations, but it really doesn't seem that it has anything to do with increasing the efficiency of the TSA operations at major airports in the United States right now.
Okay, let's come back to ICE agents. You briefly mentioned Minneapolis earlier. So we've seen thousands have protested against ICE in Minneapolis. It's a city in which 2 US citizens were killed by ICE agents. But clear protests have happened in other cities as well. So there was a huge backlash. And now we are seeing ICE agents at the airports. What is Trump expecting to gain politically from this?
He's trying to blame the Democrats for the funding standoff that's going on right now. So he's trying to say, look, these long TSA lines that you've been experiencing, the long security check lines, the inefficiency at airports, that's the fault of the Democrats, he's trying to say. And we were forced to call out ICE to try to get the situation under control. The Democrats are sowing chaos. From what I understand, people are not buying that. That is not going over well. And I think, just as he found out in Minneapolis and in other major cities, ICE is extremely unpopular, even unpopular with Republicans. So even his base has given him a lot of trouble about this use of ICE. He likes to negotiate from what he perceives as a position of strength, that the stronger and the more intimidating he can make his bargaining position, the better off he thinks that he will be in a subsequent negotiation. But this all occurring in the shadow of the midterm elections that are coming up very soon for us politically, may not go over well. And he may find that it's really damaging the cause of Republicans and of his Trump candidates in particular, if he keeps using ICE and this sort of militarized policing in the shadow of the immigration issue, which, by the way, is a winner for him. So if he could engage in the immigration issues in a more lawful way, and a way that wasn't so designed to intimidate, he'd probably have much more of a political winner there.
Here, I want to pick up something that Trump said. Let's have a listen.
And I want to thank ICE because they stepped in so strongly. They'll do great. And if that's not enough, I'll bring in the National Guard. We're not going to have the Democrats destroy our country. These people are the most destructive, sick people, the Democrats.
So Trump calls Democrats sick people in his words. What are the options here for the Democrats when they oppose more funding for the Homeland Security?
Well, that's the difficulty here, right? Which is that The worry is that if they oppose funding for Homeland Security and the administration has a lot of discretion over how they use existing funding, then they can make it look as though it's the fault of the Democrats. Now, the administration could choose to pay TSA workers, right? So the Democrats have to be very clear in their messaging that it's the administration that is choosing to use the existing funding. Homeland Security is the best funded agency in the federal government. And so, other than the Department of Defense. So if they chose, they could use the excess that they have that goes forward for many, many years to fund TSA workers to get rid of these lines and to make air traffic function efficiently again, even without a funding bill being passed right now. But politically, that's not the way that they want to play the game, and that's typically not the way these congressional standoffs work.
And talking about messaging from the Democrats, California Governor Gavin Newsom had this to say in a post on X. He said, by sending ICE into airports, Trump is proving the problem in real time. ICE has become the president's lawless, undertrained personal police force deployed to serve his agenda, not the law. So, Claire, Trump's personal police force, strong words there from Newsom. And Claire, also remind to our viewers that ICE is now the US's highest funded law enforcement agency. And in that context, does California governor have a point here?
I think he does. I think personal police force, maybe, but absolutely a militarized, and again, I would say paramilitary police force using very flamboyant tactics, wearing military tactical gear. Certainly camouflage isn't necessary in an airport. It doesn't help, right? They're not in the jungles of Vietnam. And really trying to show Americans that the Trump administration has this power that it can call out at a moment's notice. And rather than trying to reassure Americans, which would be a much smarter tactic for Republicans at this point, that they really understand the law, this is a force to be trusted, that the Democrats' concerns about ICE are ill-founded. And some of the recent congressional hearings that we had on ICE were shocking, in which the agency really admitted the nature of the problems and had to do a bit of a walk back in terms of their defense of their own agency and their own training and their own tactics. So I think they do a lot better trying to show that ICE agents really understood the law and could behave within the bounds of it. We've also seen in federal court that in case after case, the agency has refused to abide by the rulings of federal judges. And that's an extreme concern because it really makes the agency look lawless in the extreme.
So to wrap it up, are you concerned that ICE could become even more powerful under Donald Trump in the future?
I think there's a very thin line there that we're walking because, as I mentioned, we have many federal judges at the trial level, federal district judges, who are stepping up to the plate to say that ICE's tactics are unlawful, that they are violating the constitutional rights of Americans and enjoining them, forbidding them from engaging in this kind of behavior. And Americans are hearing that. That is a losing proposition for the Trump administration. Now, what the administration is banking on is that when those cases go up to the circuit courts, they get frequently reversed. And so it takes a long time for these cases to percolate through the system. And meanwhile, ICE can continue to engage in its tactics if they can't be stopped in court right away. So that's the difficulty. The fixes are long term and the damage is short term. And the kind of show of force that the Trump administration wants to engage in, I think that they will keep pressing the envelope on that, absolutely.
Claire Finkelstein from University of Pennsylvania, thanks for answering my questions. Take care.
Thanks for having me.
So what do you think? Is ICE becoming too powerful? Does it lack accountability? Or are you happy with the way things are? Let us know in the comments. If you like this video, please hit that like button. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe. Till next time, goodbye.